What was your craziest bullet effing dodged moment? I once took a girl online out to dinner at a nicer place in our town. She was horrible to the server and actually got us kicked out because she called the manager an idiot. After that, we were walking out and she wanted me to go back to her place to watch a movie, which I refused and went home. 2 months later, I was reading the paper and saw her in the police blotter for assaulting her boyfriend with a golf club. Next story. I once went on a date with this guy who used the entire conversation to try and figure out how much I would be missed. The hairs on the back of my neck were tingling for the entire time in my life as he asked me about every friend, family member, coworker, roommate, how often I saw them, how long I would go between texting and calling. Needless to say, I suddenly had 5 overprotective older brothers who were PIs and cops. Next story. Not me, but I had a hand in it. Knew this guy in high school peripherally. He was in the cool crowd of rocker-type guys. I was a nerd. New girl arrived at our school from another town. She and I became friends, and a few months later, she started dating him. At first, she seemed cool, and we would talk about everything. At one point, however, she starts talking about how she had been hooking up with her ex-boyfriend behind cool guy's back. Just before the end of the school year, she tells me she's pregnant, that she knows it belongs to her ex-boyfriend. She's laughing, like really proud of herself because cool guy is doing the right thing, and he's going to withdraw his college application and go work at the local gas station to support her and her unborn baby. Her ex, the father of the baby, is kind of a loser, so she thinks this is kind of the best thing, even that she can F him while making the cool guy support her. I didn't really know this guy that well, but I got his phone number from an acquaintance of mine who knew it. Cool guy knew I was friends with his girlfriend, but was still pretty surprised to hear from me. I told him all about our ploy and said, get a paternity test, it isn't yours. This guy was incredibly stoic, but after a sizable pause, of course, he just broke down crying for a few minutes, then thanked me. They broke up, and cool guy did go off to college and actually made something of his life. Next story. My ex-boyfriend told me he was sterile. I started insisting on condoms anyway, just in case. Eventually, I broke up with him. He currently has 2 kids with the girl he started dating after me. Next story. When I was 7, I got lost in Spain without my family. I had been lost for about 5 hours, really late at night, and had been going down some dark alleyways and car parks. I started asking random strangers if they spoke English, but there were only middle-aged men walking around alone. One guy didn't speak English, but gave me a cuddle and took me back to his house around the corner. At this point, I'm crying my eyes out and just appreciated the help and kindness. When I got to his house, it turned out he had a family, and the son was learning English in school. He got out his school workbook and asked me my name. Then they took me to the police station. My parents picked me up about 10 minutes later as they were driving around in a police car. That man could have been anyone, and I could have been kidnapped and never seen again. Not your ordinary bullet dodge. Oh, thank God. Dude, I was starting to worry he was going to go somewhere very, very bad, but just realized that the topic of the video is bullet dodged, right? Next story. 2 girls I grew up with became my tightly knit friend group. We were the misfit goths in school. None of our parents paid attention to what we were doing, and we had total freedom at an extremely young age. One had anorexia. The other had a crappy home life. These were the defining plights, so that's how I'm going to define them here, but I was also pretty messed up myself at that time. I had a crush on crap home life girl. We had been getting closer and closer. Suddenly, the one with anorexia threw herself at me like in some very not subtle ways. Honestly, really hard to turn down the offer in the moment. I mean, she literally coerced me into her bed when I had been sleeping in her mom's living room. Messed up home life was sleeping in a sleeping bag on her bedroom floor. The anorexic girl wasn't really someone I was interested in, and messed up home life was staying the night as well in the same room on the floor. So obviously nothing happened, but I just kind of slunk off awkwardly after probably at best like a small over-the-shirt fondle. And she had no tissue, and saying I wasn't feeling well, I left. I just wasn't into her, and even though I was hormone-crazed, it all felt wrong. I resisted the call of the siren and went back to the couch. To put into context how hard it was to turn this down, I would have lost my virginity that night. Instead, I pursued the girl with the messed up home life. The one with anorexia threw the biggest, most dramatic fit I've ever seen in my entire life, including threatening self-unaliving several times. Like, no one has ever topped it, and someone later on had a breakdown in front of me where they ended up committed against their will. So it turns out the anorexic girl was just hanging out with my now wife because she wanted to have someone worse off than her around. She was a mean girl. Pretty sure the anorexic girl didn't even like me in the least bit. She just didn't want me to get the other girl's attention. She was trying to F up my chances with the sad home life girl to keep her under her skinny thumb. Good thing I kept it in my pants, because that night, the girl that I did like was actually still awake, listening to me turn down the anorexic one, and she liked me back. A lot. We started dating. We were each other's first everything. I helped her emotionally survive her messed up home life, and somehow, miraculously, the messed up environment started fixing itself. Her mom got treatment or something. The more we were together, the happier we were. We both started volunteering, working on making our city a better place. We started saving money, moved out together. We did everything we could to be better for ourselves and each other. Well, I ended up marrying this girl, and we've been together for 19 years. I have one of the happier marriages in this world, and would not have happened if I screwed this crazy anorexic chick when she threw herself at or on me. I don't know where the other girl is these days. I rarely think about her unless I'm thinking about how I dodged a bullet. Too long didn't read? I didn't stick it to the crazy when I had the opportunity. I'm glad it worked out for you, but I don't really want to dunk on the girl that hard. She was clearly going through a lot. Next story. I don't know if it's a dodge a bullet moment, but it felt like I did. Afghanistan, a few years ago. Having a smoke late at night with our local cultural advisor, LCA, and a bullet whistled right over our heads for my very first time. I looked at our LCA and asked him, "What the F was that?" As he took another drag from his smoke, unfazed, he said with a thick accent, "You effing idiot, that was a bullet. You should sit down with me before you get your head shot off by the next round." And well, what can I say? My LCA really saved my life, because as soon as I did sit my butt down on the Afghanistan dirt, another bullet came whistling by. Thank you, Bilal. Next story. Back in the day, read dial-up internet and expensive desktops, I downloaded a malware which asked for credit card details. I was young and didn't have a card, so contemplated nicking my dad's and putting in the details. I didn't want to get into trouble. Thing was, the malware was asking for payment in rubles. At that time, I had no idea what that was. Was it a different currency, some other adult speak? I don't know. So I came clean to my parents, and they sorted the rest. They also deleted my LimeWire. Next story. I was talking to this girl at a party, and I was really into her. I have some obscure interests, and she was the first attractive girl I'd ever met with the same interests. Well, my brother swooped in and charmed her way more than my awkward butt could ever hope to. I was upset at first that he stole her, but got over it after she lied about birth control, got pregnant, and tried to convince him to marry her. The thing is, I'm a lot more go with the flow than my brother is. If I had knocked her up and she told me we needed to get married, there's a good chance I would have done it. Then I'd be stuck with a person who I've learned is an absolute crap show of crazy. Next story. When I was about 23, I was asked on a date by a Brazilian girl who was maybe early 30s. We went on a date, but it wasn't the most interesting evening. We didn't really click, the language barrier was there, meant we really couldn't get past basic conversation. I was a little resistant to go on a second date and felt it was fair game to say, "Sorry, I didn't think we clicked." Next time I saw her in person, though, I was berated with a bunch of insults hurled as she claimed we were supposed to get married, have kids, that I was the one. I'm very glad I was able to back away slowly and dodge that bullet. Next story. Senior in high school, and a pair of twin girls with obvious behavioral issues got pretty aggressive with me to F them both. They lived a block away, so we rode the same school bus. I was getting a weird vibe and definitely had a "this is too good to be true" feeling from it. Every day on the bus ride home from school, they tried to convince me, come over to their place. They were super trashy, white, chubby girls, and I just didn't know how to handle it. So I basically avoided them until I got a car and started driving home instead of using the bus. Eventually, after a month or so of stupid flirting and stalking, one of them got one of the other kids on the bus to hook up with them. He got them both pregnant, one with twins. They lied, said they were on the pill. Both of them wanted him to marry them, and it got really bitter and nasty between the two girls. Parents kicked them both out. He was black and their parents weren't very happy. And then the dude had to bail on his college plans to support 3 different kids and pay 2 women for child support at 18. They also all got heavy onto oxy and are in and out of jail. Oh. Next story. When I was back in high school, I was walking near the field when they were practicing their discus throw. One of the discus was wrongly thrown and headed right for my head. A friend, who at the time was walking towards me, saw this, yelled for me to duck. The discus went past my head, landed behind me. Then I realized that I could have died if my friend hadn't warned me. Imagine a flying disc lands right in your forehead. Next story. Went on a date once with the photographer from my cousin's wedding. I was in the wedding party, so we spent much of the day just chatting. He was good looking and amicable, so I figured why not. We went for coffee and it was perfectly pleasant. We chatted about the usual stuff. He told me more about his upcoming photo tour of Europe. Nothing unusual, but nothing special either. Got an awkward one-armed hug at the end, and he said we'd get in touch when he was back, which was about 4 months' time. 4 months came and went, and I just let it go. It had been pleasant, but tepid, and I guess I kind of forgot about it. Jump ahead a few years. I'm browsing the news, and I see a familiar face. The photographer, who is now in jail for an unprecedented collection of unique CP that he made. More of which, authorities guessed, was on the hard drive with military-level encryption they'd seized that police still couldn't crack years later. That photography tour of Europe? Yeah, well, he was in Thailand. Cool. Next story. I had my police car pulled over off the side of this rural road with the emergency lights on. I had stopped because there was a man splayed out in the middle of the asphalt. Turns out he was super drunk and decided to just take a nap during his walk home. I had just helped him to his feet, placed him in the back of the car to drive him home when I hear an engine revving hard. I closed the door, straightened up, just in time to have my car smashed out from in front of me by a pickup truck. I felt the truck's side mirror clip my body armor. The driver was drunk and had decided to go looking for his drunk friend. That friend was the guy I just picked up off the middle of the road. The guy in the back seat survived the impact because those old Crown Vics had massive trunks. But the driver went to the hospital, and in the coming months, he pled guilty to impaired driving. I remember the collision analysis showed that guy hit my car at 145 kilometers per hour. It was a wild night, and I still have major hang-ups when I have to stop my police car on roadways. Next story. Back in my raving days, in the early 2000s before it got trendy, I got deep into some heavy drug use and subsequently became a small-time dealer. Small time over the course of a few months rapidly became pretty big time. One night after re-upping, buying more to sell, I went over to my buddy's house to play Counter-Strike until the early hours of the morning. On my way home, I got pulled over. I had 2,500 green triangle ecstasy pills in my trunk. I pulled out my license and registration, laid it out on my lap before the cop came to my window and proceeded to be as polite as possible. The cop asked me why my eyes were red and asked me if I smoked. I said absolutely not. I never liked weed. Weird, I know. And I told him we were playing Counter-Strike for 8+ hours and that's probably why. He ran my license, which was clean, came back to my car and said, "Okay, drive safely and let me go." I left that scene crapping bricks. Had he looked in my trunk, I would have been arrested and looking at a distribution felony and at least 12 to 25 years. Not to mention it would have destroyed my life. I stopped dealing and raving after that. Today I have a lovely wife, my own home, good health, a thriving business, healthy toddler, and another one on the way. Talk about a bullet dodged. My life and the life of those I love would have been drastically different if it played out the other way, and it probably should have. I am the lucky one. I lose sleep often thinking about that. Too long didn't read. I should be sitting in jail. My life should be ruined for drug trafficking, but it's not. It's the opposite. Yeah, I dodged an effing bullet. Next story. Back when I was young and impressionable, someone stopped me on the street and asked if I'd like to do a free personality test. After enthusiastically filling out the answers to a long list of probing questions, the person who'd approached me asked how old I was. Since I was under 18, they said they'd have to get a parent's permission to give me my results. They called my mom, who tells them to stick their test right up their butt, or words to that effect, then proceeds to give me an extended talking to about trusting strange people with my personal information. And that's how I learned who the Church of Scientology were. Next story. Work IT/network security for medium retail company. Someone mentioned finding a flash drive in an envelope in the mail. You would not believe the sigh of relief when I managed to get a hold of it right before Manglement decided to try plugging it into their terminal. You wouldn't believe the sigh of relief when I managed to get a hold of it right before management decided to try plugging it into their terminal. Next story. Lived outside of St. Louis in my early childhood. Woke up screaming in the worst pain of my life and then felt my face get sprinkled with something. I actually got shot in the hip, and when I sat up, a bullet went through my window right where my head was just at, and what sprinkled me in the face was tiny pieces of glass. So I dodged a literal bullet by taking a bullet. Really expected this to get lost in the sauce, but here are some details everyone else asked about. So my bed was right next to my bedroom window, parallel to the wall. The end of the bed where my head was at was right next to the window. The bullet entered the wall and struck me in the left hip, so I guess I was sleeping on my stomach. The windows were real weird now that I think about it. It was actually 2 single-pane pieces of glass separated by 6 inches. And since both of them had a hole in them, you could stick a rod in and see that the bullet traveled right where my head had been, just on my pillow. Edit. Another side story connected to this now that I think about those windows. One time I came home from school, I noticed the inner window was shattered and there was blood all over the place. Turned out it was my dog that tried to launch herself through the window. We were pretty certain that someone was at my window scoping it out. She was super defensive of all of us. I'm pretty sure this occurred after the shooting. Next story. New teacher started at my high school at the start of the year. Integrated fine. Students were assigned a pair of teachers to pay special attention to their academic needs. He was one of mine. Because of the occasional sensitive material we covered in his English class, which I also took, he knew I had a telling sensitivity to sexual violence. As a teacher, he knew I was a troubled kid with a shaky support network. He gave me off-base but evidently well-intentioned advice about managing my controlling parents, worked with me and my other overseeing teacher to try and make school less nightmarish for me, and overall seemed like a warm, engaging guy. He gave some people the willies, but I felt fine around him. Then, middle of the week, a few months into the year, he just doesn't show up. We are told he's not employed here. No more, no official details. As you may be guessed, turned out he had an alleged history of SAing students at past jobs. I don't know how it had been handled, that they were able to find this out without him having tripped any of the flags I assume exist in the screening for potential teachers, but I guess better late than never? I don't think the school ever got, prosecuted for effing up or whatever, so I guess it was an understandable miss. But yeah, that would have been pretty effing awful. I got lucky. Me and any other kids he might have been charming. Next story. On temp job, I'd made several hours of corrections on a long document, saving version after version. When finished, I deleted all the extra copies and emptied the trash, only to realize the one copy I saved was the untouched original. It was a busy office, but as my heart sank, someone announced, "Everyone stop what you're doing. We just lost funding on the project. You'll be paid through the day, but you're all free to go. Never empty the trash." Next story. I had a type of bone cancer, Ewing sarcoma, when I was 10. It usually shows up in the bone itself, which usually makes one lose whichever limb the bone is in. Mine, fortunately, started in the surrounding flesh and was working its way towards the bone. The tumor grew so fast that I only realized it when I bumped my leg against a rock that I should not have hit. The tumor was about the size of a softball. Because of finding it like this, we got to it early enough that it could be removed before it reached the bone. I still got 9 months of chemo to make sure it was all removed though. I kept my leg, although I have a large scar on the outside of my left leg above the knee running to mid-thigh and a large dip in the same area. Also have some kidney damage relating to the type of chemo they gave me, although things are looking up there. This May, I was 6 years cancer-free, and I would have lost my leg if we'd caught it any later. Next story. I was making a day trip to Colorado to do some sightseeing. It was just me and the dog, driving a few hours over Wolf Creek Pass. I felt a little off, and stopped up near the top of the pass to get some fresh air at a waterfall. I figured I was just sleepy and at altitude, so I decided to actually hike the mile-round trip to the falls and wake up a bit. On the way back down the trail, I had a seizure. If I'd not stopped, I would have been coming down the pass when it happened. Next story. I had a coworker who was an avid runner. He was really thin and in good shape. I ran into him in public with his family for the first time. He was with an obese woman who looked to be much older than him. After greeting him, I stupidly or naively was 2 seconds from saying, "And this must be your mom?" before he cut me off and said, "OP, meet my wife, Laura." Next story. Saying bullet effing dodged really downplays the seriousness of this situation. When I was in my early 20s, I went out to the bar with some friends one night. My friend was Dee Dee and I was drinking. I had a very solid buzz going on when I bumped into someone I knew from high school who was clearly flirting with me. I ended up leaving my friends and catching a cab back to her apartment. The next morning, I found out my friend, who was supposed to be Dee Dee, got drunk then behind the wheel. He ended up getting into an accident, and while no one had any critical injuries, there were a few broken bones, etc. I could have very easily have been in that car. Instead, I have sweet intimacy with my now wife. Talk about that fate. Next story. Got dumped by my ex. Like a typical movie, sad at the time, very antisocial dude. I was sad and depressed because I had been dumped. After all, I had been dumped for another man, so I did have a feeling of just not being good enough instead of being in a relationship that didn't work out. After a while, she starts sending some messages. We talk a bit, and suddenly we start fighting. She was the first one I had opened up to and told my thoughts deep down that I hid for everyone else, and she threw them back in my face in the most hurtful manner. I was shocked. When I reflected about it, I realized she had been doing it during our relationship too. We'd have an argument, I'd present my points of view in a calm manner, and she'd suddenly just fling a crap whip to wind me up. Later out, she also had lied to me about her age and was just barely legal when we hooked up. Treated myself to a nice pizza and a good bottle of scotch to celebrate said dodged bullet. Next story. I ran out of fuel once. Normally, that wouldn't be so bad, but I was flying a Cessna 152 over the Mojave Desert at the time. It's really not a bad glider. I had to land on the highway. The landing went perfectly. The CHP pilot, with whom I was in communication during my unpowered descent, landed at the nearby airport and brought me 10 gallons of avgas. I climbed on the wing, dumped it in. The CHP blocked off both ends of the road for a use as a runway, and I took back off into the sunset. Next story. Worked for a campus PD while I was in college. Had been, unsuccessfully, flirting a bit with one of our part-time clerks who was a mother twice over at 22, living in Section 8 housing, etc. Not a bad thing in and of itself, just providing some context. My longtime girlfriend had bounced a few months back, so I had thrown myself into my work and was advancing quickly in the department, well enough that I had salaried a slot on the horizon. Feeling good about things in general, I figured I'd just roll with it when she suddenly started giving me the time of day. Had our first big night of romance coming on a Saturday night when I get a text from OFC. Derp that just said, "Cancel now. WTTYL. Wasn't sure what the heck was up, but I did just that. Called her up on the spot and said, "Sorry, problem with my car. No way I could get it to a shop and I'm out of time for our date." She didn't have a car. Few hours later, I swing by the PD and he told me what had happened. She had worked earlier in the day and was at the front desk not realizing OFC. Derp was in the squad room. You can hear conversations up front from there. He overheard her on her cell talking to one of her girlfriends about how she was going to get paid tonight, girl, followed by, "No, I'm only like 5 weeks. He won't be able to tell because the dates will be so close." God bless you, Brian. God bless you. Next story. Dated this guy briefly in college. He got into a horse riding accident early on in the relationship. Horse fell on him, broke his ankle, pelvis, and hip. Apparently had a prior addiction to pain pills I was completely oblivious to. He quickly relapsed and turned into a crazy pill-popping psycho. Tried sticking it out and I was trying to help him. I did my best. I just couldn't handle it. When I told him I was done with the relationship, he proceeded to call me the worst of names in the world, begged me to forgive him, and then tried asking me to come hang out after he had called me the biggest easy girl in town. Okay. He then started doing some harder drugs and had been involved in a hit-and-run accident. The guy he hit died. X moved the body, fled the scene, dumped his truck in a parking lot that had a surveillance camera in it. He did get caught for it, of course, but talk about bullet dodged for me. I've had some pretty crappy relationships, apparently. Next story. I went on one date with a girl I worked with. She was cute, but there were red flags. Some obvious, some not so much. She had been in jail and had an ankle monitor that was probably the biggest red flag. Other than that, she just seemed a little off. Things fizzled easily enough between us, no harm done, and we didn't even do anything to make life at work awkward. Then a coworker starts dating her, and before too long, both of them weren't working there anymore for unrelated reasons. We end up finding out later she killed the guy. She stabbed him 30 times in the back with a kitchen knife. It was very sad. He was a good guy, and he definitely didn't deserve to go out like that. I learned this all secondhand from mutual friends after I had lost contact with him. Next story. My family had lived in Dallas for my formative years, but around 20 they packed up and moved back to San Antonio, where I was born, to be closer to family. Initially, I followed them and transferred colleges, but after almost 2 years of unhappiness, it became apparent that this wasn't a good fit for me, and I wanted to move back to Dallas. Being incredibly close to my family, it was a difficult choice, but one I knew I needed to make. Flash forward a few months, I'm back in Dallas in a small studio apartment and re-enrolled in my original university. Having lived with a loud, boisterous family for 22 years means the silence of living alone is unsettling, to say the least. I watch Sex and the City on repeat for background noise until I literally kill the DVD player and I have to replace it. I start reconnecting with friends I had not seen in a few years, including my first love and boyfriend. He's elated I'm back and puts the moves on hard to get me to agree to date him again. I have a really fond place for him in my heart, and I'm not opposed, but I needed time to get adjusted to being independent and living alone. He's understanding and patient for about 2 weeks before he tells me if I won't date him, he has another girl interested. Should he go date her? A little annoyed at the tactic, but supportive nonetheless, I tell him he should do what makes him happy. I then hear nothing from him for about 6 months. Our birthdays are a few days apart, and when I call him for our yearly birthday call, he says he's been meaning to talk with me, that he's going to be a daddy. The girl he dated got pregnant and now he's getting married and starting a family. I asked if he loved her, and he said no, but he was stupid, so he had to make it right. I got off the call and thanked the stars that my little, barely adult brain was smart enough to prioritize myself and well-being above being pressured to do something I wasn't ready for, to take the easy road and find comfort in an old love while doing some uncomfortable growing up. Story worked out though. He's still married to her with a second kid and they are going strong. Next story. I once had a psychotic 1-week rebound with a very damaged, recently former stripper. She told me, and I believed, that she couldn't get pregnant. The whole thing blows up and I only get a UTI, but sometime later I'm sitting before a movie with my future wife and see a very pregnant version of said former stripper. My wife says the face I made as I frantically counted months was beyond hilarious. It had been over 9, but less than 18. So no way the current or previous kid could be mine. Near-death experience. Edit. Somehow I failed to mention she had herpes? I guess her telling me up front made the non-pregnancy claim seem more legit. So I had learned it's harder to contract if they're not having an outbreak. Figured unprotected was fine. That made sense, right? So I guess this is actually a 2-in-1 bullet dodged. Made the UTI a lot more stressful. Googling all the symptoms. Next story. I was walking back from work at 11 p.m., I work close to home, and I go to cross the road because neither of the 2 cars behind me had their turning signal on. Halfway through, the guy in the second car yells, "Hey kid!" at me. I back up a bit and the first car takes the sharpest left turn I'd ever seen, and when I saw the driver's face, he looked completely dead or emotionless. I couldn't even see his eyes, but that is probably just a trick of the light or something. The second guy pulls up. I thank him for not letting me become a pancake. He explains that he thinks that guy was completely drunk. I thought it made sense at the time, but whenever I look back, I don't think he was drunk. I saw his face, and he seemed more dead than intoxicated. Next story. Going into our second year of university, a group of us were looking for houses together. We'd found one we liked and were sitting down with an estate agent to sign the paperwork. Out of nowhere, one of the group started hysterically crying and ran out of the room shouting, "I can't live there! It's got mildew and I'm allergic!" We didn't end up living with her, but the people who did had a year of her brazenly stealing their phones, money, clothes, and boyfriends. Whew, bullet dodged. Next story. I was trying to hook up with a girl I met on some dating app. Neither of us could host, so I figured it was a lost cause. Then she started acting crazy, like she was so special I was supposed to fight for her. And because I wasn't, I was abandoning her, like all the other men in her life. I'm like, lady, I barely know you. Calm down. Next story. I dodged a bullet by not marrying my ex-fiance. I can't have kids, and I told him that early on. And when he did propose, I asked him again, and multiple times thereafter, if he was sure that he would never change his mind. I don't want someone marrying me and then resenting me or feeling like they're missing out. He reassured me time and time again that he didn't want kids and never really had. 5 months before our wedding, he broke up with me with this big story about how he felt like we had been growing apart. He didn't have the same feelings anymore and maybe he would want children someday and blah, 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 blah. I was devastated, right? Of course. And then furious when I found out the real reason. He had been cheating on me and knocked some girl up. They got married a few months after the baby was born, and then not long after that, she got pregnant again. Before that baby was born, the a-hole, that complete and utter piece of crap, contacted me and had a big, long sob story about how he had made a mistake, how his life was so hard, how he didn't like being a father, and how I was so much nicer and his wife was such a female dog. Yeah, probably because she actually needs him to help around the house and with the baby and get an effing job instead of sitting on his butt watching YouTube all day. I'm not sure why I ever wanted to marry this a-hole in the first place, to be honest. Then, as an afterthought, he threw in that he missed me. Yeah, I told him to F off. He and his first wife have now divorced, and he is married to yet another woman who he knocked up on accident. Their kid is a little under a year, and word on the street is that he is still a cheating, lazy a-hole. I am so effing glad that this crap all happened before we got married instead of after. The broken engagement was brutal, but much better than if we had been married. Next story. I don't F with guns, I really don't. During undergrad, 3 friends of mine and I went to a buddy's farm and he whipped out a rifle. We were all kinda drunk and he decided we should shoot random crap. He picked up some plates, bottles, stumps, and puts them all over. When it was my turn, I told him I didn't want to shoot it because I don't feel comfortable. He points it at me and says, "Come on, buddy, it isn't scary." And my other friend kicks the gun out of his hands. "Dude, the safety!" Now, I'm not sure if I would have gotten shot that day, but I honestly didn't want to find out. I owe my friend a lot. Next story. I was using a steak knife to try and unlock a bathroom door by trying to move the metal thing. I'm sure it's got a name, but I don't know what. A tumbler, maybe? Holding it into the door jamb, right? So stupidly, I was doing this from the bottom with as much pressure as I could manage, so when the knife invariably slipped, the blade slammed into my skull a tiny bit above my left eyeball. It took me 2 minutes to pull my hand away to check if I could see. I thought I had skewered my eye for sure, and definitely deserved to. But hey, bullet dodged. Next story. I had trouble breathing and had been wheezing for a few months. Figured it was just bronchitis that I get all the time and, got some antibiotics. Figured what the heck, I guess I'll go ask a doctor. People trained in figuring this stuff out. Found a tumor the size of a pineapple wrapped around my heart and lungs. F. Definitely should have gone earlier. But so glad I actually decided to go. Edit, I'm alive, everyone. Sorry for the delay. For those commenting about the size of the tumor, it was a little over 5 by 3 inches and went from my trachea to my diaphragm. Status update. 2.5 years cancer-free. Hey. Actually, as of yesterday, didn't realize until today. Weird coincidence. At the time, it was very not good. I got to watch my pericardial drain surgery that night because they were afraid anesthesia would make my trachea collapse. So I got to watch a surgery on myself. Awake, had to be at a 45-degree angle or the weight of the tumor pressed on my lungs, and under nothing except a local anesthetic for the catheter site. I like to think it's something not many people can say they've done. Advancing the catheter felt like slowly having the wind knocked out of you, but without the impact. I could actually feel almost exactly where it was as it went. Probably one of the most unique feelings I've ever felt. I could also feel the pop when they pierced my pericardium, and I could feel a very slight pressure relief as they drained the fluid initially. Hallelujah! Hey, thank God you're feeling good, man. But 2, guys, if you're feeling sick, go to the doctor. On a very much less serious note, I had been coughing up blood for a couple weeks, finally decided to go get checked in recently, and luckily I'm all safe, I'm not dying, but there's several throat ulcers apparently that I've developed. But I'm safe, I'm all good, gonna be just fine, gonna heal me right up so I can keep on recording. Point is, go investigate. Next story. So in 2006, I was losing weight so that I could finally afford health insurance. I figured out that if I lost 60 pounds, a $5,000 deductible plan would be roughly $100 a month cheaper. In 2007, I've lost the weight and I get insurance on February 1st. I go to get my first checkup in a long while. Everything comes back clean. March 15th, I go home, and my dad, a physician, doesn't like the look of me, takes me to get some scans. Turns out the weight I lost was due to cancer, and the previous doc had effed up and not run the right tests. But because he had effed up and given me a clean bill of health, the insurance company couldn't claim that the cancer was a pre-existing condition despite my having insurance for less than 90 days. Cancer is all gone, by the way. I didn't get stuck with a $500,000 hospital bill because of a doc who effed up. Bullet dodged. Next story. I've been talking to a guy for a couple of weeks. We'd gone on 2 dates, which were fine. I liked him enough to bring him to my friend's house for a small gathering. That night, he started acting really strange, like he was on something. I could sense that he was making everyone uncomfortable, so we ended up leaving early. I brought him home, went back to my own place, and later that night, my friend texted me that something had seemed off about him, and she had decided to Google the guy. She found some pretty weird stuff about him, weird videos he'd posted online that made him look like a total creep, that he had a DUI that he had lied to me about, knowing that my previous BF had a drinking problem. Needless to say, I ended things right then and there, although he texted me incessantly for about a week after. I was so glad I found out he was a creep before things had progressed anymore, and my skin crawled thinking about what might have happened. Next story. Running on 2 hours of sleep in 2.5 days during an invasion of Iraq, sitting in static defensive position outside of the party, headquarters 20 minutes away before stand 2, I hear what I swear is a motor scooter. Thankfully, the lieutenant in the HMMV next to my position is more aware and declares incoming. Saw my SAW gunners head down and get myself down as well. Wait about 10 seconds. Hear a thump behind our position. Wait. Peek out, see the fins of a mortar round sitting 3 feet behind our fighting position in the dirt that was excavated from said position. Once given all clear, low crawled out the position, attached engineers demoed the round, caught maybe 20 minutes of sleep before the controlled detonation woke me up. I should maybe add, this was about 1 to 4 days, I seriously don't know, after our LMTV drove into a quarry and started sinking in the middle of the South Iraq desert. Life truly is stranger than fiction sometimes. Next story. Well, just recently had a job offer which never felt right in my gut. After the initial excitement of actually getting an offer wore off, I was feeling kinda meh towards the position, but figured I could do it for a year or 2 since it would potentially allow for a better quality of life. However, when reading the contract, so many warning bells went off in my head. My husband works in employment and labor law, so I had him review things. The first words out of his mouth last night were, "Don't sign that contract as is." Some highlights include, keep in mind, I work in K-12 education, not some extremely secretive cutthroat industry. A 1-year no-compete clause for a tangentially related position in the entire county, which, keep in mind, has the largest school district. 60 days written notice if I were to leave. Not crazy at first, but good luck getting a new job over the summer, which is when most schools post positions. If I decided not to return after signing a contract, I'd have to reimburse all insurance benefits from starting July 1st. Not sure if these are standard in other industries, but I've never seen anything like this as a teacher. Basically, it would make it close to impossible to leave this job, and I could potentially be screwed in so many ways if I did. If this was what was in the contract, what could the work environment be like? Just sent off my thanks but no thanks email to the director. With the school year quickly approaching, looks like I'll be back at my current employer. Next story. Almost slept with a girl in college. I was pretty into her and ready to go, but had responsibilities in the final, so the next day I didn't bite. Kissed her goodnight, went back to my dorm, studied for the next 4 hours before my RA calls me and tells me there's a girl down in the lobby looking for me. I go down to find her with a 37-page love letter, front and back. She had written about my kiss. She proceeded to hang outside my dorm room for the next 4 months. I had to start crawling out my window to get to class, and eventually ended up dropping out and moving to another state just to avoid her. Flash forward to when MySpace came around, she sent me a message telling me she reads everything I post on there, even though she wasn't on my friends list. That was 7 years after I had moved to another state. Next story. This just happened. My ex-fiance of 6 years and I were set to be married this October. 2 weeks ago, I found out he's not only had an on and off again with a married woman who has 2 kids for the past 10 years, but he's also been soliciting older married women off of Craigslist, POF, etc. for intimacy, hot wife, group parties for the last 3 years. Yes, I kicked him out immediately. And yes, I got tested, thank God, all negative. Also came to find out that he's got 6 secret credit cards and is in immense debt. Yes, I'm an idiot and clearly not as intuitive as I believed myself to be, but gosh dang, did I dodge an effing bullet. Next story. 1 year I was looking over my finances and happened into a check deduction for healthware for my employer that I mulled for a month or 2 over whether I should cancel, since I was a healthy mother effer who didn't need no stinking health insurance. But by the kindness of the great one above, I ended up not canceling. Within the year I found out I had cancer, which needed operation, for which I spent 4 days post-surgery in the hospital, and up to now still receiving surveillance treatment. Not a dime out of pocket except for numerous parking fees, gas, and food on my 2-hour trips to the hospital, but thank you God for your blessings. Next story. My friends and I were riding bikes together through our neighborhood. Sometime at the end of high school, we'd only just reached the lighted intersection dividing 2 suburbs and were waiting at the crosswalk. Suddenly, we were all jolted by what we could only imagine was cannon fire, somewhere just beyond a slope in the road. Long story short, a very troubled man had decided to take it upon himself to use a handmade explosive on the exposed gas main pipes between the 2 neighborhoods. As fortune would have it, he wasn't experienced enough and didn't breach the metal. If he had, those pipes ran under the sidewalk, directly underneath where we had been standing when the blast went off. We would have been toast. To conclude the story, the man managed to injure himself and stumbled around on foot, bleeding everywhere until he was apprehended. The next day, one of my friends was interviewed by a news team. Thinking back, it's still weird that we could have died, completely unaware. Next story. Driving through an intersection near my college and the light turns green. So I started going. I went forward maybe 1 car length and a car comes barreling through the intersection on my left. Had I gone forward like I normally do, I would have been T-boned at a speed that likely could have killed me. Keep in mind, this is a regular occurrence in my town. Red lighters, I mean. Next story. I moved last year and was getting quotes from movers. One guy turned up and was super patronizing and dismissive. He literally turned and walked out of the room while I was talking to him. I asked him if he had specially trained packers for cases like mine. Lots of fragile, weirdly shaped stuff, you know. Which when I asked the other people I got quotes from, they were more than happy for the opportunity to list out their team's qualifications. This guy, on the other hand, was visibly taken aback by the questions. Very condescendingly, told me that he was doing a 200-box move tomorrow. So, what do you think? At this point, I adopted a slightly firmer / more business-like tone with him and pointed out that I don't know what he's packing in those 200 boxes, so it's not really relevant to me. He completely lost it. He told me, breathing hard, visibly struggling to retain any thread of control, that he don't think we're going to work well together, do you? And stormed out. He made it to the front gate and then apparently completely lost it, came back to the house and stood outside the front window, literally screaming for several minutes. I do not go outside to dignify his behavior with a response. I've never experienced anything remotely like it. I've lived on my own for 10 plus years now and dealt with tons of tradesmen of all sorts. Always had pleasant business relations with them. Plus, even if I were the most irritating, obnoxious woman he had ever met, he was only in my house for 10 minutes, tops. If he was that easily pushed over the edge, I'm sure glad I found out before I paid him to handle my collectibles. Next story. My first roommate randomly moved out without saying anything my 4th week at school. Literally, I get back from work and everything is gone. A few months later, I find out that she's into some drugs, cheating on her boyfriend and on her 6th roommate. Unfortunately, she killed my fish before she left. I asked specifically for her to not use perfume in the room because I have asthma, and in such a small space, it was likely to poison my fish. She has a guy over, they get intimate, she fills the room with perfume to cover it up. She's also been using it in the morning while I was asleep. Okay, whatever. But she moves out the next day. 2 days later, the fish has a seizure and dies. I checked all the water parameters and had been obsessively checking them every day and nothing was out of place. R.I.P. Muggle. I doctored a little piece of coral with rapid tissue narcosis for a few months, but I just didn't have the heart or the money to fully set up the tank again. Reef tanks are expensive. Next story. This sounds awful, but when I was around 14, there was this cute girl who went to the same church as me. We're talking backwoods Alabama here. Mostly old folks, so there were only maybe 5 kids my age to interact with. Anyway, we hit it off and started talking every day, went out several times. About 4 months into this, her parents, who turned out to be fairly weird and old-fashioned, talked to my parents, saying we were a good match, they'd already decided to sign for us to be married, all this crazy crap, and I started to back far away from all that. Well, the bullet dodge is that maybe a year later, she married some other guy who was also weird like her family. Instantly pregnant after the wedding, and then had a massive stroke. So the poor guy was stuck with a fully vegetative wife and a newborn child who had Down syndrome as well. All at the age of 17. Next story. My ex-girlfriend tried to set me up on a date with her best friend. We've been friends since we broke up and tried to set each other up before, so it wasn't a huge deal. So I go to meet the best friend, and the plan was dinner and axe throwing. The whole time we're both having a great time, but I just have this nagging feeling that something isn't quite right with her. As we were parting ways, and the whole, I had a great time, we should do this again, I tried to politely just play off my uncertainty. She offered for me to come back to her place, but I declined. We didn't really talk much right after, just from our lives being bat crap, and then I find out maybe a month or so after the date that she met someone on Tinder, and that they got engaged at the end of their date, and that she's pregnant from the guy. She met him almost immediately after our date. Man, a lot of people are quick to the family these days. But guys, hey, that concludes our stories of bullets being effing dodged. Turns out a lot of these are mostly about dating, which just, extra warning, by the way. Try your best to gauge, to decipher, to know who you're with and what they're like. Not that, there's any foolproof scenario. Some of these people are married for years. But anyways, if you guys have any very narrowly escaped fate that you would like to share, feel free to drop those down below in the comments, because we always love reading and we always love sharing together. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next one.